The 6 districts of Huyton, Knowsley, Liverpool, St Helens, Sefton and Wirral all came together as one organisation, if you like. The council and the functions of the council didn't disappear, but as an entity that was formed in 2015. And to get the money, it was £30 million per year for 30 years, so £900 million of new money. There had to be an election, and that took place in May 2017, and I was elected in May 2017. So what it means for us is that we now have a mayoral combined authority, and that means that we can access further funding from central government, and I'm certain that through the questioning there'll be issues around what it is that we get from them. Devolution isn't, and it's never been trying to be sold as being a magic wand or a silver bullet to all problems that we're having. We still have a government, and that government is implementing an austerity programme. The austerity programme is hitting areas like ours the hardest. The 6 districts of the Liverpool City region have had £1.5 billion cumulatively cut from its budget since 2010. So there are real issues for our councils and councillors to have to deal with. But the money that we get, we can use with the powers that have been devolved down from central government. So where some decisions were taken in Whitehall and Westminster, we've now got the opportunity to use them powers for ourselves. So it's fairly wide-ranging powers, but in a limited number of areas. But they involve transport, skills, issues around apprenticeships, economic growth, business support, culture. We got culture in our devolution agreement. We're also able to develop a tidal project, because that was also part of the agreement, although at this moment in time we're just at the very early stages of that. And we've also got housing in regard to its spatial development, and we have to develop by 2020 a spatial framework for the whole city region. So that's basically the extent of the powers. We do not deliver services, so it's not like a council where they have to statutorily deliver services. That's not what we do. We have 1.5 million people in the Liverpool City region, but really our functional economic geography is about 3 million, so double that. So that's the people that we deal with regularly. So people in Cheshire, for instance, or in West Lancashire, or even as far away as North Wales, those sort of people where they travel to work areas, that's part of our functional economic geography. And we are developing our policies in regard to a whole host of different areas outside of that, which include things like homelessness, and we've just been granted some money from central government, part of a £28 million settlement with the devolved areas, so ourselves, Greater Manchester and West Midlands, and that's to tackle the scourge, as I see it, of homelessness on our streets. And you only have to walk into town centres and city centres, and you'll see people in the 5th richest country in the world who don't have a roof over their head, and in conditions, we've just said how cold it is outside, in conditions like this, that's not by choice, no matter what people try to spin it as. So we're able, through this money, to look at providing those people with something called a housing first approach, get them into a property, an independent property, and then look for the wraparound service that will provide a solution to the complex needs that many people have. So that's what our role is. It's a strategic level. As I repeated, it's not about service delivery. I know there's an awful lot of concern, and there'll be questions on green space. That doesn't fall under my purview, but I'm not going to not answer those questions. So we'll try and tease some of those out, but then we need to move on to some of the big picture stuff that we're trying to do, such as I mentioned tidal power. Since I was a kid, this city region, or beforehand, Merseyside, as it was, Merseyside County Council, had plans for what at that stage was called a tidal barrier. And I always thought, how a ship's going to get backwards and forwards if we have a barrier. There's been plans for a barrage, there's plans for a lagoon, all sorts of things. We genuinely now stand on the cusp of being able to do something that will deliver that project that's been around for 30 odd years. And we've got a commission, a tidal commission, headed up by somebody called Brent Cheshire, who is an industry expert in renewables. He's the person who delivered from nothing the largest offshore wind turbine generating facility at Barebow Bank, just off the shores of Southport, when you go and see the Iron Men. All of that, he did that from nothing to where it is now. So he's heading up the Tidal Commission. And then we have two other assets. We have something called the Hibernia Link. Again, that's in Sefton, it's in Southport, comes up there. The Hibernia Link is a fibre optic cable that links the UK with North America. And at the other end of the city region in Huyton, at a place called Daresbury, a facility called SciTech, we have the country's most sophisticated supercomputer. And our plan is to link these two things up through each of the 6 districts. So, if you like, going through the tunnels, which we own, around the Wirral Peninsula, over the Mersey Gateway Bridge, through Huyton, St Helens, Knowsley, then into Liverpool, back out to Sefton, and then we can go to North America, mainland China, and anywhere else in the world. What does that do? Well, I'm going to split the room here because some people will remember this song, but there's a song called the Chattanooga Choo Choo, so you'll remember that. And this place, Chattanooga, decided to have a digital strategy, and he went from being a post-industrialized wasteland. The guy who commentated on the moon landings, a fellow called Walter Cronkite, he described it as America's dirtiest city. And he went from being America's dirtiest city to America's first gig city. So successful that they feed into Palo Alto and into Silicon Valley because they've got digital connectivity that's 200 times faster than the American average. That's only sort of super fast. What we can do with our supercomputer and the facility that we're trying to develop is ultra fast. Now, if you've got ultra fast digital connectivity and clean, green, renewable, predictable energy, then that's a game changer for our city region. And I always say that we were the gateway to of that, right at the forefront of developing that. So we're using our funding that we've got, not just the 30 million, but the other funding that we've been able to secure, put it into something called a SIF funding pot, single investment fund, and that's what we're using. And again, through some of the questions, I'm sure I'll be able to explain to you how we're using that, not just in the city region, but actually in Knowsley, to benefit residents and to create those jobs, apprenticeships, and houses that we need. So I'll leave it there. We'll get on to the questions, and hopefully I'll be able to tease out some of the other things that we're doing as a combined authority. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Okay, so the first question around green spaces is from Crispin Evans. Crispin, could you read the question out for Steve, please?
We have seen a conflict between the need for local authorities to raise money by selling off green spaces, which raise public health issues. There are future challenges of balance between the need for land, for housing, public health and business to expand to create jobs. As the Metro Mayor, have you been influencing business, housing, local authorities, and what is your strategic vision for land management in the region?
Okay, it's a fairly wide-ranging question, to tell you the truth, but you're right about two things. First of all, definitely there's been conflict, and that conflict, I think, is being caused through a government who have imposed austerity onto areas like ours and cut the 6 districts in the Liverpool City region by, as I say, £1.5 billion. And that means that the things that councils used to deliver, they're finding it much more difficult to deliver. So they're going to have to be more inventive. And in this area, one of the solutions that the council have come up with is to look at the disposal of a percentage of parks, 10% I believe it is. Now, I'm not responsible for that policy, but I understand the concerns of people. And I think that there isn't a councillor in the whole of the Liverpool City region that wants to carry out some of the decisions that they're having to currently. But I would say that if people here had their household income cut by half or more, would they be still doing the same things, and would they be able to do the same things that they were doing before that reduction? And the answer obviously is no, you wouldn't be able to do that. And it's the same at councils. So the difficult decision that they're making about the disposal means that the money raised would go into a pot to secure the other 90% of parks and green space in perpetuity. It goes into an independent charitable trust, I'm told, and that will be used to ensure that the parks are, and the upkeep of the parks goes on. Again, I think the most difficult thing is nobody wants to lose valuable parks. They are the lungs of our areas, and we do have issues specifically in some of the major corridors, what's called the key route network, about air quality. So we don't want to lose green space. But conversely, the councils need to deliver services, and they can't do that for parks. And you'll probably seen that our roads aren't swept as often as they are, the grass verges aren't cut as often as they were. Some of the services have had to be reduced, so bin services, which used to be weekly, are now fortnightly. That's all as a result of austerity. That's all as a result of central government decisions. So whilst I don't represent Knowsley Council, at least I can identify the difficulties that they're having. So what we're trying to do is part of the overall city region remit is to develop a spatial strategy by 2020. So at the moment it doesn't fall under the locus of the Metro Mayor, but by 2020 we'll have to. So each of the local authorities has now got a local plan, and in that local plan that identifies the areas, and so will a spatial strategy, where we look for housing and job opportunities. And to do that, the spatial plan needs to look at issues such as where we put medical health services, what the infrastructure would be, what the knock-on effect would be to the amenity in the area, and a whole host of different things that have to be considered as part of that. And it's going to be particularly difficult, I think. We've got 6 districts with very different needs, and there are going to be tensions. I'll be honest with you, there are going to be tensions in us doing that. But Knowsley have chosen their route, other local authorities have chosen theirs.
Thank you. And now we have a question from Mike Gittins.
I'd just like to say, for starters, if I had my finances cut by half, the local parks would become all the more important to me. I wouldn't be able to travel as far, and it'd be more my place of entertainment and enjoyment with my children. Now, my question is, can the combined authority provide help for the local councils to prevent them selling off public green space assets, i.e. the public parks and public open green spaces, to provide revenue funding for those remaining? In other words, they're selling capital assets for revenue at the end of the day. Can you help?
I just try to explain that the combined authority is a strategic body. It's not certainly a conduit for money to come from central governments to just pass out for services that are delivered by local authorities. The figures are absolutely stark. The English average of cut is £188 per head, and Knowsley have been slashed by £485. Now, I didn't in any way say that this lessens the importance of parks. I actually said, as the green lungs, I know how important they are. The difficulty is that the council have to deliver certain statutory services, and 70% of their budget is for statutory services for child and adult social care. So that leaves 30%, and that 30% has to do an awful lot and be spread around as much as possible. I don't think it's, for me, it's not Knowsley Council that are at fault here. If they had 100% of the budget that they used to, they wouldn't be taking this difficult decision. And other local authority areas up and down the country, Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, whatever, are also making difficult decisions because they've got difficult choices. But the combined authority has ring-fenced money for projects. So, for instance, the £134 million that we got for what's called Transforming Cities is for transport infrastructure projects. So we can't use that to give to councils to keep parks open. That's not what we're there for. That's not what devolution's all about. It's to take decisions for ourselves with limited budgets that used to be delivered by central government.
Thank you. And now, Andy Ewell, you've a revised question. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Yeah, there we go. Hi, Steve. There's a question about your new powers about planning, planning for the whole city region, as you've already alluded to. It's shorter than the original question, but still in two parts, so bear with me. Firstly, you've been talking about parks and green spaces. With your new powers to plan strategic development across the city region, how are you going to make sure that brownfield regeneration gets maximised while you protect those green spaces as far as possible? There will have to be some green fields built on, we all know that. How are you going to do that prioritisation? Because it's difficult. I'm sure you want to, but it's difficult how you're going to do it. Secondly, how are you going to make sure that voices of communities across the city region are heard from the start of your planning process, and not just heard but acted on as well, so that you can avoid the mess they've got over the road in Greater Manchester, where Andy Burnham's had to do a radical rewrite, in his words, of their spatial plan? Thank you.
Okay, I'll just try and explain to people what that actually means. No, I don't mean that unkindly. I mean, people might not understand what the spatial plan is, so what that means to our local authorities. And that is that the six of them, for the first time ever, are going to have to work together to agree a strategy for the disposal of land. And we've done two things already. There are the local plans, which I mentioned, and there's also something that I think it was yesterday that we published called a brownfield register. And that is to encourage the development on brownfield first. It's a Labour Party policy. It's a local council policy. I think all 6 local authorities are signed up to a brownfield first approach. But the difficulty with some brownfield sites is contamination. So we've spoken with the government, with an organisation within government called Homes England, it used to be called the HCA, and the HCA are now looking to work with us so that we can remediate contaminated land, and we'll pay for that. And then we can encourage developers to build on brownfield first so that they don't have to look towards greenfield sites, because we'll take the cost away of that remediation, and it makes it financially viable for them to do that. So that's the first thing that we can do as a combined authority. We need the right land in the right places, and therefore the right houses to be built in the right places. And currently that's not the state of play. So again, it will be where the market has a demand that we have to look towards, because quite frankly, we need more housing in the Liverpool city region. We've got a proposal that by 2020 we'll have delivered 25,000 new homes, and even that won't keep up with the pace. That's across the city region, not in Knowsley. That's across the city region. Even that won't keep up with the pace of demand. And we need to do that because we want to grow the economy. But also, one of the issues which came as a surprise to me is that with this brain drain, with graduates who go through our universities and then leave the city region, they put forward that one of the issues for them, believe it or not, was housing, and that's why they were leaving the city region. So we need the right type of housing. I don't think there's any problem with certain types of housing. We've got lots of terrace housing, for instance, in the city centre, but we've also got market failure with many of those terrace properties, so we need to do that. But if we do develop sites, we need to ensure that we get the transport right, and that's why it's important that that fits into the spatial strategy, and that we get schools for those areas if we increase it, and health centres, and the utility works. And I also want, and I spoke at a housing summit that we had last week, that I want digital connectivity to be every bit a utility as gas and electricity or telephone nowadays, because we need to ensure that the digital connectivity that we provide within the city region is able to be used by people who may want to create businesses from their own homes. So we're doing all that. But it's a partnership approach. This whole thing has to be a partnership approach. And I've highlighted quite honestly that there will be tensions. I know there's going to be tensions, but we need to do that to avoid what happened in Greater Manchester. And the consultation will be far and wide in regard to, it won't just be individuals, it'll be any organisations, it'll be open to any groups to feedback on what the proposals are at each stage. We're not going to do something and then put it out and wait for the avalanche. We're going to try and take people with us. But look, we might get 20, 30, 40,000 people who'll be part of that consultation. We're not going to be able to please every single person. So it has to be in what's the best interest of the city region at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. The final question on green spaces is from Alan Mackenzie. Alan, are you here?
Well, you've touched on the issue I was going to bring up, but from a historical point of view, wouldn't it be ring-fenced some of the parks? I'm talking now about Course A Park, and phase in the sale of parks in general instead of one almighty list of 17 parks going up for sale. Would it not be better if it was just a phased-in issue?
My understanding, and I'll look towards somebody, yeah, it's over a 15-year period. That's what I'm led to believe. So it's not going to be overnight. And this is the thing that I was told when I spoke to somebody from Knowsley Council, that people need to understand. This is not a fait accompli. It's not that every park is definitely going to be sold. It is about identifying those park spaces where there was interest in development. So the alternatives might be, and I've just spoken to somebody outside who'd be interested in this, that if communities get together, they may be able to purchase the land through, raising funds, but also with help of different pots. There's all sorts of pots that councils can't get, but groups can, community groups can get. But they may want to do that and then ensure through a covenant that the land can't be developed. So it's not about selling the land for development. It's about the overall space that the council can't continue to look to maintain. And by raising this fund, I think in total it's going to raise about 40 odd million quid. That'll go into a bursary, if you like, into an endowment that can be used to maintain that. That takes away the burden from the council, and then the council can spend its limited funds on the things that we all want it to do. So we wanted to see that it improves adult healthcare and social care and children's social care and some of the things that make it a better place to live in. That's really what this is all about. It's not a choice by councillors that they want to get rid of green space at all. In fact, quite the opposite. If they, as I say, if they had the money that they used to have, they wouldn't be doing it at all. But it's a difficult decision because of decisions taken by central governments to reduce the overall funding grant. But I'd say speak to your councillors, speak to the councillors. Speak to the councillors in the area. Listen, I used to be a councillor, and we fought against the development of somewhere in my ward, which was going to be a greyhound track, and it's because it wasn't the right development. It wasn't that the park was going to be used. It was going to be a greyhound track and then a stock car racing track. We stopped that because it was the wrong development. Sometimes I supported, and by the way, later on, there was another plan for it to become a green office space, which we supported. Sometimes the development's right, and you'd have to take each individual park that's proposed to be sold off and see what the plans for that are before I think people rush to look to just object to anything at all being development. It may be, I think on Corte, is it Corte where they had the facility built? Is it for, the Wildflower Centre and stuff. So that was built on it, you know what I mean? So that is a building on Greenfield. So not all Greenfield building is bad because it can protect the land.
We've got one final question from the floor. Just wait for the microphone, please. Thank you.
All the plans that you've got seem to be for people who've got plenty and want more. There's nothing for people who've got nothing and need more. All you talk about a covenant. King George V had a covenant on it, and he sold it to Westbury overnight, before planning permission. I, as secretary of the Huyton Football League, got a letter off Jim Keith, the leader, that they couldn't sell it, ever, and they'd sell it under their own dead bodies. They'd never sell it, because it was a covenant. But they got rid of the covenant, and they didn't tell the people of Huyton that they got rid of it. I have all that documentation from 1991, including the letter from the leader of the council. All your plans about broadband and £250,000 houses with the doctor's surgery and the shops and the infrastructure, where is it? Nowhere. Knowsley is like a building site. That's all it is, a building site. You're taking away the lungs of Knowsley, the parks, and they don't have to sell them. You've got enough brownfield sites to build on. The reason it's not built on is because it's too dear for the building firms to come in and build on them. It seems as if those who have want plenty out of the combined authority, and Knowsley and Liverpool and Sefton. Those who have want more and more and more. You're leaving behind the homeless, the sick and the needy. Not once did I hear you say, Steve, that we will help people who haven't got homes fit to live in. All I heard you say was the developers, what they want. It is the people who live here. 50 years there's been a porous butter in Europe. And now you're saying we've got to change because of the cuts. No, it hasn't changed. We've always been poor. It's been managed poor. And we've always had the worst of the deal. You're leaving behind the people that need it. You build a building from the bottom, from the foundations, not from the top. And all these developers, we know who they are. They're all the same crowd. They bought all the prime sites in Huyton. Yeah? And they keep buying it up. There's 6,000 empty homes in Knowsley. Empty. 6,000. In Liverpool, there must be 10,000. And the homes you're talking about are not homes for any of these people here. The £250,000. £250,000 homes. You never once mentioned social housing. Not once. You mentioned about the developers and what they want out of us. We might as well not be here and just move out till it's all built on. We live here. We've lived here all our lives. The people who need help. Not the ones who want more and more and more, who want digital and want this and that. What are you going to do for them?
Have you got an actual question that you'd like
I'll
to
tell you
ask?
what's the question. What's in it for the people who haven't got anything?
Okay, thank you. Steve?
With the greatest respect, you really should listen to things that are said before you say things like, you haven't once mentioned homeless. I just spent time telling you about the money that we got for homelessness. So it's one of my priorities, and we are doing stuff for homelessness, and we'll continue to do it. You then said you mentioned brownfield sites. I did mention brownfield sites. I absolutely mentioned it, as in it's Labour Party. Hold on, you've asked the question. So you said I didn't mention brownfield sites. It's Labour Party policy. I've said not only do we want to use brownfield sites, but I'm applying for remediation monies so that we can decontaminate land so it becomes more viable to develop brownfield sites. So I am doing something about brownfield sites. I'm trying to bring them back so that they can be developed. Then you said, I'm taking away green space. I explained to you, I've got no purview. I've got no locus over the local authority. We're the combined authority. I am not a representative of Knowsley Council. So it's not me taking anything away. And then you talked about living in this place. I'm from this place. I was born in Kirby, so I'm a Knowsley person, so I know the area. So you don't tell me that I don't know the area, because I do know the area. I know the area, and I know the people of the area, because I used to be one of the people of the area, and still am the person of the area. What I'm trying to do in my role as the Metro Mayor is to attract jobs. So if we get jobs, we can get training, so we can get apprenticeships, so we can get skills, so we can get economic growth, so we can get better transport links, so we can get better air quality, so that we can do all the things that we need to do to make us a successful economy. I explained that we're going to use the brand of Liverpool instead of Knowsley, Liverpool, St Helens, Sefton and the Wirral. That's what we're going to do, because we can sell that internationally, because we need inward investment. So there's a whole host of things happening. We haven't even mentioned transport. Transport's huge. We're going to look at the re-regulation of the bus services so that we can take better control over our own bus services. We're spending £460 million on state-of-the-art rolling stock, so we'll have the most sophisticated trains in the whole country so that we can integrate our transport system. There's a whole host of things that I said I couldn't do in the few minutes that I had to introduce it, but they come out during the questions, and I'm sure that some of that will come out during the questions. But one thing I won't take is lessons about things that I haven't said when I have said them.
Okay, can we move on, please, and we maybe consider... We've got 3 questions on Brexit. So the first one is from Maria Safar. Is Maria here? If you could wait for the microphone, thank you.
Given that Vauxhall car factory at Ellesmere Port is looking at closure, Jaguar Land Rover at Speke have gone on short hours. The promises of the Leave campaign are broken, especially with regard to the NHS that I work in. This government is clearly going down a very hard route of Brexit with no deal and will damage our local economy. I think the estimate was 14%. And it will devastate our region economically and socially. Will you lend your considerable political weight behind pushing for a second referendum on this?
Considerable political weight, I wish. I tried to persuade as many people as I possibly could all over the country. I literally spent days and days and days travelling the length and breadth of the whole of England, but also in Scotland as well, to persuade people that we should remain. And I did that because we can demonstrate in our city region, especially in Liverpool, it has to be said, the Liverpool city centre, and you see the transformation of the cityscape. But we can demonstrate how powerful and how beneficial the European Union was to us, especially at a time, it has to be said, when we had a Tory government who didn't give us any money. Surprise, surprise, look where we are again. But a Tory government who actually sat around the cabinet table and discussed the potential managed decline of Liverpool. They actually did that. So I tried to persuade as many people as I could. And in our city region, 3 areas voted to remain, 3 to leave. And it was closer than the national picture, which was 52-48. As you know, ours was 51-49. So really, really tight. But people, despite that, decided that they wanted to leave. And I think we should respect the referendum, but do everything that we possibly can to mitigate the worst excesses of the swivel-eyed loons. Not my saying, one of the Tories actually call them, her colleagues, that the swivel-eyed loons who want either no deal or a hard Brexit, because they know that the damage I think that will cause to UK PLC, but to areas like ours, the potential damage to ours is so great. So I met with David Davis, myself and Andy Burnham. We said that we would, if there's no such thing as a northern powerhouse, we'll create a northwest powerhouse. So we met with David Davis to explain there needs to be a differential settlement in the country. So we're not the same as the City of London, and we have very different needs to other areas in the south or even in the Midlands. And we are looking to convene a convention of the north so that the north can speak with a loud voice, because we need to counteract some of the noises off in the south and southeast, and certainly the London-centric nature of politics in this country. So we're doing that. But I don't agree that we should automatically look for a second referendum. I think we need to convince people, and our friends Boris Johnson and others are doing that on our behalf, but convince people of the folly of what they were claiming, the £350 million a week bus, for instance, for the NHS, and all them lies that were told. We need to convince them that they weren't acting in the best interests of the whole country. But I want to just turn this on its head slightly. I think we end up with a positive vote to leave the European Union because of the political system in our country. I think we should be addressing that. I think there's a fundamental breakdown in distrust of politics and politicians, myself included, in some quarters. I think that the London centricity, and certainly when people talk about that Westminster bubble, as I said in the introduction, 7 years I was a Member of Parliament, it really does exist. It genuinely does exist. Everything's seen through the prism of what happens in the best interest of London and the South East. And people, you know, we're saying about devolution. Devolution is our chance to take decisions more locally. That's because Whitehall mandarins who've never been to Huyton or to Kirby or to areas in the Liverpool City region were making decisions on our behalf. And devolution is our opportunity to address that. And I'd rather have any decision taken more locally than those people down there deciding what's in our best interest. So I support Jeremy Corbyn and what he's doing over the customs union. I think it's a start of a more cerebral debate on Brexit. But I still think we need to convince large swathes of working class areas that actually it wasn't the European Union that was broken, it's politics in this country.
And now, second question on Brexit from Brenda Ashton. Brenda, front, thank you.
Thank you. What do you see as the advantages or disadvantages of Brexit to the city region?
I could probably list more disadvantages, but I'll try and be positive. But well, some of the funding that we got, R&D, for instance, to our universities, so essential to attracting students from all over the world, and for those students to come and visit our city region and to see the reality of the way we live, and not that's perpetrated like scum newspapers used to do about what we were all about. So I believe when people come in, they're won over by the warmth and the friendliness of the people, but also the beauty of what we've got to offer. And it's not just in the Liverpool city centre, you know, just down the road from here, Knowsley Hall is just absolutely fantastic. The most visited tourist attraction in the whole city region is Knowsley Safari Park. It's not in the city centre. So there's something in all of our areas, and that's why I think it's important that our universities are central to this debate on Brexit. And I took the Vice-Chancellor of Liverpool University, now Dame Janet Beer, to this Brexit meeting with David Davis, and we put over a very strong case about why universities need the transitional funding. But let's try and be as positive as we can. I think there are going to be aftershocks of Brexit for many years, probably for a decade or so. But we're a western-facing port, and I think we're on the right side of the country again. And the possibilities are, whether we like it or not, that there might be bilateral trade deals with the lovely Donald Trump and others in America. So for us, we have to look at what the opportunities might be of those bilateral trade deals. And with a post-Panamax facility, and the only one in the country, we've gone from being able to offer freight services for 5% of the world's container fleet to 95% with that facility. So we need to do a number of things to really look at how we can capitalise on any advantage, if there is any advantage. And as I say, I think there are more detriments. But that will mean we need better rail links. If we get one of these containers with 12,500, 13,000 containers, most of that will be, the logistics of it will be that will be transported via roads by HGV. Most HGVs are diesel. That creates air pollution, but also the congestion that will cause. We need a rail link from the port onto the HS2 line so that we can get additional capacity. But again, this is where me and Andy Burnham are putting aside some of the tribal differences that have existed between Liverpool and Greater Manchester for decades, because Liverpool needs to be linked into the first stage of west-east connectivity. So Liverpool goes down to Manchester Airport, Manchester City Centre, Leeds, Sheffield, Newcastle, but right the way through to Hull. If there's going to be a check for another rail system, it will be between what's called Crossrail 2. London have already got Crossrail. They're going for Crossrail 2. And we're going for Crossrail for the north. It's called Northern Powerhouse Rail, but if we call it Crossrail for the north, that's because we can say, you've got a Crossrail. You want Crossrail 2. Actually, we want Crossrail for the north now. And that has to start in Liverpool and then work its way across. For every £1 in transport that we get, the south gets 6. So we have to look at what Brexit might provide to us in regard to transatlantic trade, because that might start to help us to rebalance the economy. But if I could have my time again, I'd spend even more time, and I spent an extraordinary amount of time going and knocking on doors just to persuade them extra couple of % to see if they would change their mind. I get so many letters and so many emails from people now as the Metro Mayor genuinely asking me, is it possible that that vote can be expunged and for them to change their minds? And unfortunately, that's not allowed Yeah, but I do think but even if we sneaked it through, I still think that it's as a consequence of the system that we've got. It was people voting against the EU because of what was happening with the British government, and we never quite got that message over, and I think that's what we still need to convince people about.
Thanks for that. The final question on Brexit is from Jean Walker.
Excuse me, I've just got to let you know it's Jean, not Jean.
Sorry.
Right, you've sort of answered part of my question, and part of my question have overlapped with what Maria and Brenda have already said. What I wanted to know is what plans have been put in place to mitigate the financial impact of Brexit on our region. I know you've sort of tried to say that, but I'm not sure I'm convinced by it. The second thing was, I wanted to know, would you add your voice, would you be brave enough to add your voice to those who are facing the reality that even if there had been careful planning, Brexit's going to leave us worse off than full membership of the European Union? Now, I know that you said you worked hard beforehand, but this is the second meeting where I've heard you say, you know, basically that's it, it was done, it's over. I don't feel like that. Other people don't. And there are people in the public eye who are still saying so, you know, some very prominent people. So, they're my questions.
Okay, the last one first then. Do I think we'll be worse off? Yes, but I've said that. I think as a country, UK PLC will suffer for a decade or more before we even start to recover from the shock of Brexit. There is the Shared Prosperity Fund, and that's what I'm trying to see whether we can get a fair share of the Shared Prosperity Fund. We're going to concentrate on that, and that's why we had that meeting with David Davis. That's why I took both the chair of the LEP and the Vice-Chancellor of Liverpool University, instead of just taking politicians, so that a Tory government could hear the message from other people that they supposedly support business and unis. But have to look at where we can gain any advantage. Otherwise, if we don't do that, we'll be left further behind. Other areas are doing this and seeing what might happen. It's the plan B, isn't it? You know, what happened with the civil servants. They never planned for Brexit, and then we're left into the terrible situation that we currently are. We have to plan for what comes post-Brexit, but nobody knows what that is. So if you know, please tell us all, because all we know is what Theresa May said, which is Brexit means Brexit, and that doesn't mean anything to me. And the businesses that I speak to and the apprentices that may well not be able to complete their jobs, their apprenticeships, the people who are losing their jobs over in Ellesmere Port, and the fact that down the road in Jaguar Land Rover, we've seen a drop-off there. I think this is all signs of the uncertainty that Brexit has caused. I'm not totally pessimistic, because I can't be, because I have to do whatever it is that we can do to reinvent the Liverpool City region. And that would have come whether we had Brexit or not, but I have to do that. And I think if we work hard ourselves strategically, that we might be able to book some of the difficulties that other areas are going to have. Apparently, if you have a look at that report that came out last week, we are ahead in regard to the potential for growth. We're ahead. Well, I'll tell you where we're behind. We're behind Oxford, Cambridge, and Bristol, I think it was, wasn't it? But we're ahead of London, Birmingham, and Manchester. So our potential is huge, and our brand is better than any of theirs. And I have to use all of this to try, go on, in the possibility for future economic growth. So we need to exploit that, don't we? We need to look at that. But that's not an excuse for what happened in Brexit. I wish it never happened, but it has.
Thanks for that, Steve. We've got approximately 5 minutes left and 5 questions, so it could be a bit of a rush. If we just take the question from Connor Tibble, and I hope I've said your name correctly. Connor?
I'm not Connor, but I may as well take his question, if that's all right, Steve. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm from the north end of Liverpool, and we've put an association together called the North Liverpool Residents Association because of the lack of funding, which has gone on round Anfield and Walton, Kirkdale, which you know very well. Terry May passes on his best wishes, by the way. Okay. The thing we want to speak about, just very, very quickly, just on the green areas, I don't want to go back into it, but where I live, we've got some of the most poorest and most unhealthiest people, and I don't mean that in a bad way, people who suffer with chronic cancers, heart disease and stuff like that. So I know we need social housing around the poorest part of Liverpool, but taking away the parks necessarily won't be the best thing to build on, because these people suffer with really bad health. So that was just something I'd like you to take on board, just on that part. Another question off Ian Davidson, who's part of our group. So there's 2 questions. First of all, Andy Burnham's looking at something to do with the police commissioner and maybe looking to take some of the role on himself. His question is, would you consider on taking the same sort of pathway, considering our police commissioner's staff over, I think, a year, he said, cost £834,000 a year, which obviously through the cuts, saving that amount of money in the area would be, well, you know, it's priceless really, isn't it, for that amount of money. And just one last question, please. In the area of Walton at the moment, it's had no investment for many, many years, as you know, Stephen, you fought for it. We have a terrible issue with rats. Really, really bad issue with rats. And nothing's getting done. They set out a pilot scheme on 7 streets only, when basically the whole area needs doing. Now, the argument is that people can't have wheelie bins because the entries are too narrow, but our argument is that people can have wheelie bins in the yards, and on bin day, obviously, put the bins out for the collection. Now, they are some of the poorest people in our area, and they're putting out rubbish in their back gardens in black bin bags. Now, these rats are having a field day, an absolute field day. And so what's happening then? They're putting them out in the back entries. They're growing and growing and growing by the thousands each week.
I'll try and answer it, because I'm really conscious that we're trying to get a couple of more questions in. So on the rats one, and if you want, I'll speak to you more about this on the way out. I'll stay behind, because it's not unique, obviously, to those streets. But you're right, there is a huge propensity for areas that have alleyways and black bag collection services to be overrun with rats, and it's because basically you're feeding the rats, aren't you? So that's what you do. The other question that you asked was what? Oh, the Police and Crime Commissioner. Yeah. So you're right, Andy Burnham, in his devolution agreement, the Greater Manchester devolution agreement, he got the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Fire and Rescue Service, the Waste Disposal Authority, and also health devolution. Now, I said when I was on this stage, when I was looking to be selected, that I didn't think that our city region was ready for health. So I'm glad that we didn't go down that route early doors. It might be something, if Andy can develop a model, that we go back and revisit, because let's face it, if we integrate our health and social care service, that would be a good thing. But I think we all want to protect the N in our NHS, so that's the most important thing. But there's ways in which we can do it anyway, and we are through the Combined Authority looking at how we can better integrate those services. But we are looking with government at what what Devo 3 is called. So there's been a second round of devolution. Devo 3 might mean that we look towards both the Fire and Rescue Service and the Police and Crime Commissioner to bring those over, and potentially, but we're not on this, but the waste recycling authority as well. But that's something for 2 years.
Do you have time for one more question? Keep going. Have we got a Thomas case? Okay, Thomas, if you'd like to ask Steve your question.
Hello. What's your proposals for Liverpool being Liverpool City Region being the first autism-friendly city in the world?
You probably know if you read the manifesto. I've made a pledge that we will become a city region that is dementia and autism friendly, and we've already started that process. The 6 local authorities have nominated a senior councillor and a senior officer, and they're meeting now, and it's to try and get the message out that if we look at simple things like language, for instance, when somebody says to somebody in the workplace who may be autistic, it's a piece of cake, that's taken quite literally, that they mean there's a piece of cake somewhere. So all you have to say is that would be easy to achieve, and by doing that, it makes the person who has autism, makes their life so much easier. So we're trying to get that messaging out about how we can really affect things. I'm a dementia friend. I'm going to go on the autistic training as well, with an organisation that came in to see me the other day. It's a half-day training, and what I want to do is to roll that out to as many people as we possibly can across the city region, so that we can get that stamp of approval to be both the first autism-friendly but also the first dementia-friendly city region in the country.
Thank you. Have we got a Kevin Wrigley? No? Okay. Ronnie Evans? Ronnie. So Ronnie has a question. The microphone will come your way now.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Steve. It's good to see that, you know, big companies are reinvesting in this great city, in particular Peelport. But the problem I have with all of this, Peelport have stated that once Liverpool 2 is ramped up, there will be an extra 33% of container traffic using Seaford Dock. Now that's great for, obviously, the profits of Peel Ports, and I know Liverpool City Council, along with Sefton, are in the process of upgrading the roads, the corridor towards the dock. We know that. The problem I've got is in relation to those people who drive those vehicles. Now, I know we've had the discussion, Steve, but my concern is Peel Ports are saying that a truck will only be in the dock for 17 minutes. So we have no responsibility for those drivers in relation to facilities. Now, the Regent Road is covered overnight with trucks laying there with no facilities of hot meals, showers, toilets, none of that. Now, my concern is that a 33% increase in that container traffic, we're going to have trucks parked in the likes of Knowsley Industrial Estate, Huyton Industrial Estate, because there's just nowhere for these people to go. Question, Steve. Yeah. Are Peel Ports or any council surrounding our dock have any plans for driver facilities in relation to showers, meals, and obviously somewhere to sleep? Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, we've discussed this before, and I think it's appalling that in the 21st century there are still people who have to defecate in a bag to throw it in a bin because there aren't toilet facilities for them before they get to the port. So with Unite, we asked for a breakdown from Peel Ports of what the overall facilities were. So not just whether there was toilets and showers, but somewhere to rest, somewhere to get something to eat, somewhere to get something to drink, and all that sort of stuff. And they did come back with something, and I've sent it back to them and asked them to provide us with some more detail, to tell you the truth. So we're in the process of doing that. But we have convened a further meeting with Peel Port and with Unite the Union so that we can discuss this, and hopefully we're hoping to get it to a round table discussion so that we can find a solution. We might be part of a solution. The Combined Authority might actually be part of a solution. We own a piece of land and we're looking at whether that might be suitable. But we need to work in partnership, and that's why local authorities working with the Combined Authority, you're seeing some of the agglomeration benefits now of doing that rather than what you would have had to have done in the without a Combined Authority, is to work just through Sefton Council, because that's where the entrance to the port is, even though the majority of the traffic will be clogging up roads in Sefton, Knowsley, Liverpool, etc., etc. And if it is going to increase, we also need to ensure that we get as much of that off the roads and onto rail as we possibly can, because you won't be able to move in the city region soon, and you know what the congestion does to air quality, not just about people being able to get round in their cars, but of people in that corridor getting respiratory illnesses, lots of asthma, and some people in an area where the life expectancy is 15 years less than in areas down south, reducing their lifespan even more. So we are trying to look at it as a big picture thing. We haven't been able to do it in 9 months. That's how long I've been in the role, but it is something that we're working on.
Thank you. And the final table question is from Dawn Payne. Dawn?
Can you hear me? Yeah, hi. I just wanted to come back, actually, Steve, to what you started this evening's session with, which was when you were talking about the fourth industrial revolution. I think it's a fascinating topic. And my partner and I basically run a business which is about accelerating the city's creative and digital entrepreneurs, because we're passionate about the city. We think there's so much talent and opportunity here. So really kind of inspired by that kind of vision that you have. When I've read the book by Klaus Schwab, where he talks about it's an opportunity for cities to reinvent themselves as cities for entrepreneurs. So that's all amazing. But I also saw the report that you talked about, which talked about the growth opportunity of the city. But prior to that report, it was slightly disheartening to see a report from Nesta, their Creative Nation report, which talked about Liverpool still almost being on a par with Middlesbrough. Not that there's anything wrong with Middlesbrough per se, but in terms of it being an incipient cluster because of its low micro-business survival rates. I'd just be really interested to get your point of view on that. Yeah,
it's a big challenge for us, isn't it? I mean, just to explain that the fourth industrial revolution stuff, 65% of the kids now in our schools will be employed in jobs that haven't yet been created. And when you look at it like that, it's like, wow. So they're not going to be doing the things that we've all done. They're going to be doing jobs that we don't even know what they are in the future. And that's why the fourth industrial revolution is so important to us, and that's why we need to get ahead of the game. So that report was sobering, wasn't it, in all honesty? I think it's, if we can get micro businesses, so the small, no SMEs, but the small ones, if you can get them over the first 12 months, I think they're 75% more likely to last, to be successful. So it is that first bit that we need to do more on. Through Leslie and others, we're looking at how we can provide better business support for people at that end. So for instance, again, some of the older people of my age and above will remember when I used to watch Coronation Street with my mum, when the advert came on, there was an advert, and on it said, If you want to invest in Warrington Runcorn, phone Eileen Bilton, and they had the number on it. And so there's some people who can remember that. And Eileen Bilton actually became, I think she did very well out of this. She was a secretary to the director and did very well out of it herself. But what it was is it highlighted that you need one point of contact for these things. So we're trying to create a single front door, one front door for businesses to try, when you get in trouble, to try and help them, to signpost them, but also for inward investment, also for marketing, to get the brand right and all of that. So we want to create the ecosystem for those businesses. Now, we've got some great examples, especially in the creative sector. You've probably been to the Baltic Triangle and the old Cairns brewery site, and that's starting to be an independent cluster. That's, well, we're helping out with all of that. There's a big ask. Where, you know, this might be one for the future, but they're saying that if we could get a rail station there, then you can imagine how that would transform that area. So we're looking at all these big infrastructure projects so that we can get inward investments, we can get companies setting up here. But that digital, the digital connectivity that I spoke about, that's not just for the big life sciences companies. That will be for people who embrace VR. We've got a fantastic company that you're probably aware of called VTime. And VTime, for me, world leaders in virtual reality. And I'll just spend 2 minutes just to tell you about this experience of virtual reality, because this is something in all of our lifetimes that we'll be doing, and it literally did blow my mind a bit. But I met a NASA scientist in virtual reality, and there was an avatar of him and an avatar of me, and I could only see him just like, and you see me. And we had, we met in Paris. We didn't really, this in virtual reality, and then we went to a television studio in Silicon Valley, and we had a virtual reality television audience, but I was sitting in front of 200 people in a room with my thing on. He was in America sitting with his thing on, and then it was getting live streamed like this thing is tonight. So we had an audience as well, but not in the room. So we had 3 audiences. It was the first time it's ever worked. And this is where this technology is going. In the future, I am going to split the room now. I'm a Liverpool fan. So I've got friends all over the world who support Liverpool. And they'll be able to put these headsets on, and we'll be able to go the match together without people moving from their front rooms. And if you want, you can go to the pub beforehand, and I'll be sitting in our back kitchen, say for instance, having a bottle of bud or something, and they'll be sitting in theirs, but we'll be sitting together, talking to each other with these. I'm losing people because it's just crazy. We're the world leaders. Liverpool is leading the way in this sociable media, it's called, and I want to use that to encourage people to get involved in it. And I'll just give you this one final thing that we're doing. We're working with an organisation which people might know called Liverpool Girl Geeks. And why we're doing that, and that is because during the first Labour leadership contest, I was going around the country with Andy Burnham, and Yvette Cooper, who was a leadership candidate, said that she wants to really address the issue around gender stereotyping and the fact that women weren't going into these high-paid, high-value jobs of the future. And 82% of males, 82% of data coders were males. So I checked up on that, and it's actually gone up, not down. So we need to get into schools so that we can encourage young girls to get involved in STEM and all of these digital applications that will come about in the future, so that we can smash some glass ceilings and break down those barriers to address that stereotyping that's gone on for far too long, and to give employers of the future the right people with the right skills for those jobs. Because if you only fish in half a pond, you're not going to get all of the best. And that's what's happening currently in areas like the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So we need to do that. I think Liverpool City Region can take a lead on that, and that's something that drives me forward every single day. Thanks.
Thanks for that. We're slightly over time, so I think, unless we'll call it a day. I'd like to give Steve a round of applause for his honest answering. And thank you all for coming. There'll be more events of this nature across the city region. There've been some, and I believe there's more. So if you want more information, it's on your website.
I'll stay behind if anyone wants to.
Okay, so stay behind for a short period for personal questions of a political nature. Thank you. Good night.